Hey, this is Astro shots number 4. Today's subject is the starting point of the sidereal zodiac. But before we get to that, we need to talk about the sidereal versus the tropical system of dividing the zodiac. Some astrologers use both systems complementary. They use the sidereal nakshatras and the tropical signs. One of them is Vigdikara, he uses them like that. He considers the signs to be tropical. Now, I do not disagree or agree with that. It may well be correct that that was the case, that the signs, the rashis, are tropical. Where I do differ in opinion is that the tropical system is to be used for longitudes. I'm convinced that the tropical is about declination, and that for longitude we should keep the sidereal. Why is longitude sidereal? Because you need to pin coordinates, geographical or celestial, to a backdrop. On Earth, we pin them not only to the equator but also to the meridian, the prime meridian, which itself, this prime meridian, is tied to Greenwich, to a city. So it must be pinned to some visible backdrop. So longitude needs to be pinned to a star. To use a coordinate system that is not pinned to something visible or fixed is floating. What if the prime meridian on Earth would move away from Greenwich? No one would take such a system seriously. So this vernal point is floating, and that makes it unreliable. Unreliable to draw any astrological conclusions from. Such a system that is moving is unable to give consistent data to draw any conclusions from. If longitude, the coordinates grid itself, is moving unfixed to anything in the sky or on Earth, you cannot deduct any significant conclusions from the planetary positions in the tropical system. At least, you cannot draw any conclusions from tropical longitude. You can use the tropical for declination. Why? Because declination is pinned. It is pinned to the celestial equator. Critics may say, yeah, but hey, tropical longitude works for me. Yes, of course it works, but not in the way you think. Tropical longitude works only because of its connection to declination. It means that any effect you think to experience from tropical longitude is an effect from declination. If you have the sun at the start of tropical Cancer, you're not experiencing the effect of 0 degrees longitude in Cancer, but of the sun's 23 degrees northern declination. To paraphrase the comedian James Gregory, sometime in the past, some nut took the time axis of the declination cycle, divided it in 360 degrees, and started using it for ecliptic longitude. But the thing is, you cannot simply divide a time axis and change it into spatial distance. Tropical longitude is a mask behind which hides declination. Tropical longitude is a reflection of declination. When you learn about declination, you will, or you should, understand this. Declination also explains the dignities, especially of the sun. The sun is exalted in Aries, because in Aries it crosses the celestial equator and the day's light becomes longer than the night or darkness. Same for the sun's fall. The sun is in fall in Libra. Why? Because upon entering Libra, its declination goes negative, below the celestial equator, and the nights become longer than the days. Darkness becomes stronger than the light. This is pure declination. It has nothing to do with longitude. Does this mean that the signs should be reversed in the southern hemisphere? Yes, the tropical signs, which represent declination, should be reversed because the dignities have been calculated or were calculated in the past from the perspective of the northern hemisphere. The reason is that most centers of astrology in the past were situated in the northern hemisphere: Egypt, Greece, India. So for example, in the southern hemisphere, the sun's power increases from the 21st of June to the 21st of December. Some say that I'm mixing things, that longitude and latitude is one set, and that right ascension and declination is not a set. But that is reversing the case. It is the tropical astrologer that is mixing things up, using declination for longitude. I'm merely pointing that out. The fact that we're still having this debate is ridiculous. If we can't figure out something as simple as obvious as this, then how can we expect to figure out the more difficult aspects of astrology? Okay, it also took me 9 years to see it, but as soon as you get into positional astronomy and learn about declination, it should be obvious what we're talking about here. This debate is a result of tunnel vision, of looking only at longitude. That's why we fail to see the bigger picture. The solution to this is simply to step back, look at the whole of positional astronomy, and then you see it's quite simple. When you look only at the solar system, you can never figure it out. You can never figure out the starting point of the sidereal system. When you just look at the solar system, you can figure out, of course, the start of the tropical system of declination. But to figure out the starting point of the sidereal, you need to step back and take a look at a bigger cycle, that of the sun around its jewel. Then the sidereal anchor point makes sense. In the introduction of the Holy Signs, the author says, when the first point of the sidereal Aries rises on the fall equinox, the sun around its jewel is closest to the galactic center. So we see that the starting point of the sidereal is not random. There are two main arguments against the sidereal, and these are: first, that there is no star at the start of Aries; second, that the starting point would be random. The critics are right about the first point, but they are wrong about the second. Yes, they're right that there is no star at the first point of Aries, although some claim it to be Revati. And because there's no agreement on this first starting point, that's the reason for the existence of so many Ayanamsas. But the starting point is not random. The starting point of the sidereal zodiac is not random. There is a point right opposite, at the first point of Libra, and that's the star Spica. So the question is, why not begin the zodiac with Libra? Actually, it appears, or it might actually be, that the ancient civilizations did use the first point of Libra as the first point or the anchor point of the sidereal system. We can use Libra in the definition for the sidereal anchor point if we replace the fall equinox with the vernal equinox. And then the definition becomes: the sun around its jewel is closest to the Vishnu Nabi, or the galactic center, whenever Libra rises at the spring equinox. There are several reasons why it would make more sense to use the first point of Libra as a starting point of the sidereal. From the sidereal point of view, well, we have a visible marker, a fiducial star, at the first point of Libra, and that's Spica. Also, Libra is the only inanimate zodiac sign. It is a balance, a scales, the point where things tip from one arm to the other, like the transition point between the rising arc and the descending arc in the Yuga cycle. Lastly, the planetary ruler of Libra is Venus, the planet of love. What better planet to rule the highest point in the Yuga cycle, and being in Libra, pure spiritual love. And actually, legends suggest that the zodiac did indeed start with Libra. In Omram Ivanhov's book, we can read, when God became polarized in order to create, the balance was set in motion and began to oscillate. In fact, in some traditions, creation is said to have begun not with Aries the ram, but with the constellation that is diametrically opposed to it on the zodiac, with Libra, the scales. So this was the topic of today, that instead of using Aries as the first point or the starting point of the sidereal zodiac, it would make more sense to use Libra as a starting point. This was Astro Shots number 4. Thank you for listening.